Dear friends, today we have not an interview, but a high-level challenge between two generations of geopolitical analysts. We brought on stage our friend Dr. Ankit Shah, welcome, and a veteran of geopolitical analysis, Pepe Escobar. So, gentlemen,
Thank you.
the idea of this battle is each of you ask two questions, one to another. So, let's get started. I think the first one who will ask is Pepe Escobar.
What's going to happen with Kashmir?
Okay, so I believe that the US dollar, the single country reserve currency status, was maintained by clashing neighbors all across the geographies. So Europe standing at Russian borders, Russia standing at Chinese borders, China standing at Indian borders, India standing at Pakistan borders, Pakistan at Afghanistan borders, Afghanistan at Iran, and Iran at Israel borders. So it was the two bucket theory. One bucket of nations got dollars and arms, the second bucket of nations got sanctioned. So all the artificial hotspots which were created during the dollarization period, those hotspots are now reversing with de-dollarization. So I believe just as Ukraine, when it will be solved, half the portion will go to Russia and half will go to the Western companies. Similarly, I believe POK, which is Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and the hotspot of Taiwan, both will reverse as well, along with Iran-Israel conflict, that will also reverse. So I believe that the occupied Kashmir will be taken over by the Indian side eventually.
How?
Well, this is mostly a part of it is diplomacy, because you will have a lot of Gulf nations who are aligned to the de-radicalization process. They will help us out, in negotiating with Pakistan, and
Including those two here, Saudi and the Emirates?
yeah, the Saudi Arabia and the UAE would have a big role. They had a big role during Balakot strikes as well in the negotiations. Otherwise, the war would have immediately begun if the Indian pilot was not released with that conflict. Similarly, as we are seeing that India-China LAC border is to a solution direction. So it looks like that is a green signal for Kashmir as well as Taiwan.
Taiwan is a completely different story. Sorry.
Yeah.
I've been following China for over 30 years.
I believe that
Taiwan, you have to understand what Deng Xiaoping conceptualized already in the early 80s, even before the return of Hong Kong and Macau.
yeah.
We're not in a hurry. We can wait until 2049, and there will be a peaceful incorporation of Taiwan to China.
Correct. I do not see a military conflict, but there is a possibility of a military adventure at the outskirts of Taiwan.
False flag,
If at
not
all.
a military, false flag, in fact. The Americans will try a false flag. There's no question.
Possible. But they do not want to destroy Taiwan, that is for sure. That is
No, they
100%.
said, in fact, they would destroy Taiwan and they would destroy TSMC if it was incorporated by China.
Semiconductor.
Exactly.
Yeah, they won't. Yes, they want an intact Taiwan.
Never underestimate the stupidity of the American establishment. Never.
So that's for the Taiwan thing. It would go back in a phased manner, without a military conflict, without destruction. That makes sense. Agreed. So now my question to you. So from the Paris Olympics images that I saw, I derived three predictions. One is partition of UK. Second is an American economic union. And third is greater Israel through this through this century. Now, I would like you to put some percentage number to these three possibilities. First is partition of UK.
Well, there is already a sort of larval civil war in the UK. There are whole regions of the UK which are mega dysfunctional. And nobody cares about it. It's deindustrialized, very violent, nowhere to go, high unemployment, basically urban wastelands. So, but I don't see them succeeding from the UK. I see them being stagnated for the near future and a long time in the future, you see. The UK, everything is concentrated in London. That's the problem. There are no other centers rivaling London.
And that has become a radicalization hub.
Exactly. And interesting comparison, because Muslim immigrants in the UK, they adapt. In fact, they speak the language, they adapt, they adopt the English way of life. They may not necessarily agree with whatever government they have, Tory or this unspeakable mediocrity posing as labor, in fact. But I don't see a partition. I see a lot of stagnation all over the place, and probably, from Birmingham going north, or the northern half of the UK, it's an absolute disaster, with a few pockets in Liverpool or Manchester, but that's it. That's about it.
So it's kind of an economic stagnation.
Yeah, totally, completely. Second
was American Economic Union, that includes the South American nations, including Canada and Mexico.
Well, that's different. You're talking about an expanded NAFTA, including South America. I don't see it happening. The Americans, they look at South America basically as their backyard, and if they don't get what they want, they try to get it violently.
They're clashing about the Maduro government.
Exactly, very violently. They are absolutely terrified with good relations between Russia and Venezuela. Terrified. Because they see those immense unexplored oil reserves going the other way. Or, for instance, Maduro offering oil packages to a great deal of the global south. Everybody's going to take it, of course. And, of course, protected militarily, if that's the case, by Russia. So you can imagine the American ruling classes looking at that, considering that they thought that Venezuela was in the bag before Chavez. And after the death of Chavez, they also, okay, it's going to come back to us eventually. No, not at all. So this is a very, very sticky problem. And the fact that many South American governments actually don't recognize Venezuela is because they are under heavy American influence, including Brazil nowadays, which is not even here. They sent their stale banana posing as a Minister of Foreign Relations, which is a joke, and what I call the slipping and sliding diplomacy of Lula, So he literally hit his head on the floor, and not metaphorically, He should be here when you are discussing the future of the multinodal, multipolar world, and he's not. So Brazil over here is not even a minor player in the BRICS meeting. It's a shame. It's an absolute shame. Okay, 3.
And third was Greater Israel.
No fucking way. Eretz Israel is not going to happen, because there is, with all the internal problems, internal challenges, the axis of resistance will never allow Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, never. The price to pay will be huge, because there's no Israel. It's basically a killing machine. It's not a government. It's an eschatological cult. It's a bunch of psychopathological genocidals, in fact. There are no redeeming qualities for Netanyahu or his cabinet. And all these crazy settlers in the West Bank, 800,000 of them at least, armed to their teeth and answering to absolutely crazy apocalyptic rabbis, These people, they may have local influence. They are very good at destroying things. They will try to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. If that happens...
Al-Aqsa Mosque, you're saying?
Yes, they will try to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, because first they need to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque to build the bloody third temple in Israel. If that happens, expect the Muslim world as a whole ganging up against Israel. I don't know how would that be solved militarily, but there was going to be a heavy response. And then the Americans will have to intervene, and then we're going to have a major conflagration. These people, they only think in apocalyptic terms. I'm not minimizing the problem. And this is the realistic view of the way they think. That's why diplomacy is impossible with them. Any sort of discussion, any serious discussion about a sovereign Palestinian state, because they simply want to exterminate the Palestinian population. And that's the major problem. This is something obviously the West doesn't understand, but the Muslim world understands very well, and especially the axis of resistance, which at least is putting up a fight against these lunatics.
So you do not see a regime change in Iran?
No, I don't see a regime change here. I've been to Iran many times. I've been writing about Iran since the late 90s, in fact. There are serious problems with the Iranian system. And of course, it's very hard to first understand and then to agree with this, in many aspects, Khomeiniist system. And the fact that many of the religious leaders in charge of the system, they don't understand anything about economics, for instance. This is very, very complex. I had conversations with, high-ranking mullahs or ayatollahs, and when we started to try to talk about economics, they didn't have a clue. And this is extremely serious. And, okay, we have, for instance, the Iranian foreign ministry, very competent. They have more than 2,000 years of diplomatic finesse. It's different. Many ministries, extremely competent, very well-educated population, excellent universities and all that. But the political decisions, the main ones, are clerics. And that's a serious problem. For instance, there are clerics that understand the world very well. For instance, Raisi is a cleric. The president that hardliner, but he understood the world very, very well. He was a very cunning politician as well. So you believe
that must have been a covert operation to shoot him down?
No, it's not a matter of shooting them down. It's
this helicopter crash.
This is very tricky. So I can get into...
Because Israel has that kind of capacity.
But I can get into trouble if I...
Okay, all right.
If I tell you what I learned, I can get into serious trouble. So I prefer not to get into it.
Let's keep it secret.
Exactly. But Iranian insiders who know how the system works... They have their own doubts as well. At the same time, other very well-informed insiders said, no, it was really an accident. So there are 2 points of view. They respect each other. This is a taboo subject in Iran. You cannot touch it. It's too sensitive.
But we have seen...
Assuming this was an attack, they will have to declare war against Israel.
If they did,
and they don't want it.
Yeah, they do not want.
They don't want any war. They don't want a war with Israel, and they don't want a war. They have been preparing for a war against the U.S. for
decades.
24 years, 25 years at least. And they don't want, they're ready. If that happens, they're ready. And they know that the price to pay will be horrendous. But they're ready. They're ready. So I admire that mix of steadfastness and altruistic spirit and fighting for what they believe. I admire that a lot. We don't have to necessarily agree with the ideology and the way the system is conformed. This extremely strong Shiite ideology permeating the system. We don't have to agree with that. For instance, I am an enormous fan of the old Persian Empire, which was a completely different construct. You see? So, but you have to try to understand how the system works. It's a solid system. There is corruption, like everywhere else. Of course, I agree.
In many cases. Yeah.
Exactly. But don't forget that they are under ultra heavy sanctions since forever, since the Islamic Revolution, in fact. And still, they manage. Still, they have a very high educational standards. Their military know-how is extremely impressive. They have outstanding engineers, mathematicians, etc. So you have to admire their survival instincts and their inner strength. This is quite impressive. Even if you don't agree with many facets of the system.
See, one of my observation is simply an observation. Across all the Islamic regimes that we see across the world, my understanding is if the birth rates are the lowest in a specific Islamic country, that is a signal of rebellion of women against that regime. Do you see something of this kind in Iran?
No, I don't.
Low birth rates do not signal that thing.
Well, but in the provinces, the birth rate is still relatively high. There's an enormous difference between Tehran and the rest of the country. You see, I haven't been inside deep Iran for quite a while. I would love to go back. My last time, you cannot say that Mashhad is deep Iran. Mashhad is a big city, in fact, and it's a pilgrimage center. This was my last big Iranian city outside of Tehran that I saw, and that was before COVID. So I'm sure the situation changed a lot after COVID. But I would love to travel into deep Iran to try to answer your question, which is a very good question. Yeah.
Because compared to other Islamic countries, they have the lowest.
They have the lowest compared to Saudi Arabia, for instance.
And there are video clips where the women are just playing pranks with the clerics, taking off their hats and stuff like that.
But where is that? In big urban centers or in the countryside?
Urban centers.
Yeah, but in the countryside is different.
No.
Yeah, okay. Urban centers could be Shiraz, big city as well. Maybe Isfahan. Yeah, it's possible.
All right, your turn for the question.
What is the real Modi position on BRICS?
The Prime Minister, in my opinion, is looking forward to become the bridge between the East and the West. Because understand, the Western collective, which has gathered a lot of military and covert might over the last few decades because of the dollarization period, if that military might is not given a sense of purpose in the future of the world, if they do not get the clarity of what their role is going to be in the new multipolar world, there could be a lot of disturbances which this might can create, especially for countries surrounding the US, because when they sense that the Western currencies are losing purchasing power and they won't be able to do the global policing like they used to do before, this entire covert and military might will focus on South American countries and Canada and Mexico, right? So when Russia, India and China, as big powers within BRICS, when they take over the regional integration of trade and the security of their spheres of influence, and the shrinking global policing of the Western collective, in that sense, I think India is the only bridge between the East and the West to maintain the balance of the global order. Otherwise, because what is going to happen is the Russian and the Chinese are not going to give access to the Western companies of their markets. We know, we just landed in Kazan and Twitter was, you can't access Twitter. You can't access YouTube. Now, these are big tech which are now being called as state within a state themselves, because they are able to have a manipulative say during elections. They can tweak algorithms and stuff like that. So when we move towards more and more multipolarity, there will be more move towards regional integration and indigenization of technology. So the only way the Western companies can have access and make profits is the Indian market. Now, we need to know that the Russians have aged, the Chinese have aged, The Japanese have aged, the Koreans have aged, the Europeans have aged, the Americans have aged. Indians have more gold today than the entire central banks of the world put together. The private Indian citizens. So
Where is that go?
with the Indian citizens, right? So we
No,
hold,
not right. I would love to see that.
it is, that is a fact.
No, it's not. It's not confirmed by anybody. No.
Private Indian citizens have more gold than the central banks of the world put together.
Wow, that's a huge thing. Can
Right?
you?
Because this is the Sanatan currency. That is why
How can you prove that?
this data, this public data,
No.
it is there. In fact, if you just Google out, it will say 25 to 27,000 tons is something what Google will say. But I'll tell you,
You cannot trust Google. I'm sorry.
No, I'll tell you, it will be more than 75,000. Right? I can tell you that because it was the gold which was.
Let's go to India. You know, all the gold is there.
But that's private citizens, not the central bank. 800 tons something.
Yeah, it's so much.
But we hold the maximum gold in the world, and that's the real purchasing power. Besides that, we are the youngest population in the world. So all the aged people, where are they going to park their investments? Obviously in the young working population. So this is India's century, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. The aged Chinese will be taken care by Indians. The aged Japanese will be taken care by Indians. The Germany has.
What do you mean taking care?
Well, they're asking Indian human resources. Germany has just requisitioned 90,000. Israel has just taken 10,000 plus workers because they know these are the only people who are the most peaceful, family-oriented, savings-oriented people. They do not believe in conversion of religion and stuff like that. They are never involved in any kind of conflicts. Their career is perfect. Their education is done. They do their jobs, and they are never into any kind of conflicts. So all countries who are going to face radicalization are going to ask for Indians. So I have absolutely no doubt.
I like this point a lot, but we will have to wait a little bit to see if it's going to happen. Yeah.
So Prime Minister has a vision of 2047. That is, we are going to complete 100 years from our political independence negotiated that we got. So the vision is that we will be in an economic position where the countries of the world would come and take our guidance.
Fascinating. So Modi is the new Deng Xiaoping.
So we do not agree with the concept of superpower because that is a lot of domination, that is a lot of imposition of policies. That is not what India looks out for. India looks out for giving guidance. And for giving guidance to the world on policies, we have to first reach that economic might. So 2047 is the goal.
Fascinating. It is Deng Xiaoping 2.0.
He's a visionary. So my question to you is, what do you see as a solution for de-radicalization, where with the background where Saudi Arabia, which is the hub of Islam, and UAE, two major countries in the region, have started adopting Indian mandirs, yoga, and Ayurveda, and now even music teachers are being officially announced as a position in Saudi Arabian schools. So they have seen the Chinese style of de-radicalization, stealing organs from Muslim bodies, Uyghur bodies. They have seen the Russian and American style of de-radicalization, those fighters moving from the top and dropping bombs. I think they have safely selected Indian style of mandir, yoga, and Ayurveda to de-radicalize their people. What do you see as the future of the West Asia with this de-radicalization background?
If it goes on like this, there's an enormous future. The problem is on the other side, the West, they're radicalizing more and more. The problem is not West Asia. And the problem is not even Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, because they already, MBS and MBZ, they are very, very clever. They already saw, okay, let's de-radicalize, and we keep all our privileges.
And by the way, viewers,
Exactly.
MBS and MBZ are the only two leaders whom Prime Minister Modi addresses as brothers.
Really, that's fascinating. Much more than Putin, but they have an excellent relationship, Putin Modi. Excellent. The problem is the radicalization of the West. And this is going to get worse and worse because
for the West.
It's a parallel process of loss of geopolitical power and loss of geoeconomic power. And they don't have a plan B, period. They really thought that was the end of history. And when it didn't come, they had never thought about a plan B. And that explains their state of total desperation now. And they're even more dangerous now.
Do you see crusades in Europe?
Of course, but there's no question. In fact, the mentality is still the 11th century. And Europe is going to go back to the 11th century again.
Crusades.
Of course, but there's no question about that.
So
and the Americans is even worse because the U.S. is not a nation. The U.S. stole land from the original peoples. It's a settler colonialist place, essentially, and it's reverting to their barbarism, the initial barbarism. But now they are cannibalizing because the civil war in the U.S. will cannibalize whole sections of the U.S. And internally it will be totally divided and cannibalized, and externally nobody will respect the U.S. anymore in a matter of years. If it goes on like this, we can have the beginning of a civil war de facto after these elections. Whoever wins, there's going to be some sort of civil war afterwards. Mega civil unrest, practically civil war. So it's incredible because the cancer is corroding the whole body from the inside, from the outside, skin level, you name it. And of course, geopolitically, they can only convince vassals. And they managed to convince the Europeans to fight a war for them and pay the price for them, the current war in Ukraine. It's fascinating. It proves how beyond redemption these political elites in Europe are. And they look at South America and say, we have to control South America or most of South America by any means necessary, which makes it even more dangerous. If they cannot control Venezuela, they can control Brazil. The way they are doing it now, easily, without spilling blood, without even a counter revolution. They subjugate the government in power, bribing, threats, long-term threats, you name it, hybrid war, fifth columnists, foundations, perfect. It's working with Brazil like a beauty, unfortunately.
So one thing that we both agree on is crusades for Europe.
Crusades for, exactly. The new Crusader era.
We agree on it.
But I'm fascinated by your Kashmir point of view. I don't think it's going to happen like this.
Well, dear friends, let me thank you, our guest today. Thank you, Pepe Escobar. Thank you, Ankit Shah. It was very interesting, really. And I suppose we should meet more often.
Yes.
How do you think?
Yes. Consider it done.
Okay, good. For our viewers, subscribe to Think BRICS, share our content, and we will give you even more interesting stuff. Thank you.